Assalamualaikum everyone. Before we get started, please fill out the form or do what the slide tells you. Thank you. And there was also a link sent out in the WhatsApp to who's struggling with the QR code. See it on the Okay, I think we're good to get started. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Iman and I will be moderating this session. This event is currently run on YouTube, so again, massive shout out to the planners, IMSA, MISG for organizing this year and giving us a platform to where we can connect with one another. So to my left here, I have Imam Anwar, who graduated from the Islamic Scholarship Program from the Khan Seminary, where he studied under a number of scholars and teachers. Imam Anwar has previously served as the Imam and Religious Director at the Islamic Association of Mid-Cities, and is a former instructor in the Rufqa program at the Taqwa Islamic Seminary. He currently serves as the Imam and Director of Religious Affairs at Luis's Mosque. Imam Anwar graduated from Stony Brook University with a Bachelor's of Science from the Department of Biology with a concentration in Developmental Molecular Genetics and a Bachelor's of Arts from the Department of History with a concentration in Global History and Social Change. He then attended the University of Medicine and Health Sciences and graduated with honors as a Doctor of Medicine. The topic that we have today is one that is sensitive and will require a level of maturity. This session is called How to Build Your Iman After Doubts and Difficulties. As Muslims in a secular country, our faith will be tested, and there will be moments where we may encounter doubt. Historically, this topic has been one that has been taboo and one that is not talked about, but that approach has to change, and Imam Anwar will be sharing his wisdom on how we can fortify our faith in times of uncertainty. So to our left here, we have some prompts which you guys have left some responses to, and Imam Anwar will be giving his opinions on some of these responses.
So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum, y'all. How you guys doing? Hanging in there? Does someone have like a really good lunch that they want to share? Instagram ready? No? Yeah? Okay. Very cool. They don't let you guys like rate or whatever?
Yeah, but a lot of these are closed. Christmas.
Oh, Christmas? Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, so I guess I'm reading these one by one. Are you guys saying the same thing? What are some environments, circumstances, or relationships that did not strengthen you?
Yeah, they're seeing what's up there, so seeing what you're saying.
Oh, okay, very good. How did you address them? Yeah, when prayers are not answered, that's a big one. Argumentations in the mosque, seeing Muslim friends making bad choices, bad experiences with Muslims, yeah. The Muslim community being a bad influence on my life, seeing sins normalized either by fellow Muslims or non-Muslims, going to college, weakened my faith, as I struggled with not being able to answer questions other people had about my religion as they knew I was Muslim. Very good. Lacking on my well-being, being surrounded by Muslims who don't pray. Yeah, bad deeds. There was a lot, not making time for prayer. Working to pay rent. Wow. Yeah. So, what's fascinating about all of these responses is they are pretty much in line with all of the academic and institutional research that's being done on why people leave faith in general. So one thing you have to understand is the trajectory of the society in which we live in, increasingly postmodern and Western liberal democracy that we sort of call home. There is a mass sort of abandonment of faith in general. And one of the bright spots, however, is that by and large, the Muslim community is the slowest to kind of adopt these trends. So if you look around, by and large, the churches are empty. Especially when it comes to young people. They're just not there. It's a demographic that's missing. The synagogues, the same way, right? The only thing they've got going for themselves is they've got the Jewish community, by contrast, has a really robust educational system that they kind of have to go through. And then when they become a man or a woman, they've got a big party, a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah. So that sort of keeps the younger crowd there. But once that occurs, that's it. They're gone. Right? So when you poll some of these other religions and their practitioners for why they don't practice anymore, it's some of the same answers. Right? Which sort of means that we're dealing with not issues that are specific to Islam per se, but issues that I think all of us as religiously minded members of a community all are going through. So the difference though, however, is unlike other faith traditions, our religion actually has some profound responses to these questions. Some of these questions were asked even by companions of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So questions that they, du'as that they had, that were not answered. So in the moment, the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of his most famous comments about du'a was what? He said that the Quran guarantees that Allah listens to every du'a that's made. Furthermore, Allah says in the Quran that Allah not only listens to du'a, but He also responds. He also responds. But the problem occurs is that our definition of response, I apologize, my face isn't as beautiful as yours. It's not working. Thank you so much. Our definition of response is, how come God didn't give me exactly what I wanted? And Islam fundamentally flips the script on that expectation. To begin with, that the proof of the fact that there is a God or not isn't that God caters to what you ask for. Rather, enough anecdotal experience in life, and I apologize, this next line will make me sound like a super, super old man. I apologize, I'm not that old, but sometimes every once in a while, I will exude old man energy, get off my lawn type energy. This is one of those moments, all right? The older you get, the more you'll actually start accumulating like a lifetime's worth of anecdotal evidence that will illustrate to you, like in your personal life, that every single time you made ultra specific dua for a very specific thing, and Allah gave you something like in that category, but not exactly what you wanted, almost inevitably. And I've actually never spoken to anyone in my life, really, who's had the requisite life experience, who told me that what Allah gave me was worse than what I asked for. In the moment, you won't know. In my own life, I can tell you, when I was in college, there were two institutions I really wanted to go to graduate school or med school in them. One of them was the institution that my father graduated from. And the other one, I actually knocked on the door, in person, and talked to the admissions director. Right? In one case, I went back a week later, and the director of admissions pretended like she never met me. Now you can imagine the devastation in my heart. The other case is when we met the person, the guy was like, oh, I know your father, we could go back in the day, we graduated together, this and that, you're guaranteed to get in. The very next day he called me, and he was like, bro, there's no way. Your MCAT sucks. Actually, my MCAT was pretty good. Your GPA is terrible, and we can't justify it. You're not going to get in, right? And subhanAllah, I'll kid you not, I was legit depressed for 2 months straight. But eventually, the institution that I went to, I could not be more happy to Allah that I went there, because I met the best friends that I keep for life even now. Even now. And small things I never even considered. For example, this is something silly, but right across from the apartment that I eventually ended up signing the lease with was the most bomb halal restaurant. Possibly, this is being recorded, so I shouldn't say bomb as an imam. But anyway, it was that food slapped. Every single day of grueling 18 hours of studying. So that restaurant was the only restaurant that was open late for students. And 99% of the students couldn't eat it because they didn't live by it. I lived across the street from it. Right? So this is something silly, but in your life you will find situations where the thing that Allah ultimately gives you is something much better than you honestly could have ever imagined. And what that requires though is a bit of patience on your part. It's a bit of patience on your part. I apologize again, I just keep asking you this. But just because Allah didn't necessarily give you what you asked for, does not preclude the fact that Allah exists and that He's listening to your dua. So if you don't get exactly what you asked for, then what exactly happened? The Prophet has clarified for us in authentic narration that duas basically have three distinct fates. That if Allah decided in His infinite wisdom that what you asked for is in your best interest, then He will get what you get what you asked for. Believe it or not, that is actually the worst case scenario of the three. The second one is Allah reserves it for the hereafter. Which kind of sounds like a cop-out, but think about every single time Allah describes the hereafter in the Quran. He always says two things about it. Number one, khayrun, it's better. And number two, abqa, it's everlasting. So essentially Allah is basically saying, you want this in life. Guess what? I agree with you. Let me give it to you in a way though that's better, and you can keep it forever. You can keep it forever. In another context, imagine if a parent did this. A parent was like, oh, you really want a PlayStation? I'll give you one, but only for an hour. It's that's kind of mean. You're kind of giving it to me to taste it, but that's it. Right? But basically Allah says that yes, I agree with you, I'm going to give it to you, but in a way that lets you keep it forever and ever. And in a form that's in the akhirah, which is necessarily better than anything you can have in this dunya. So, and then there's a bunch of cannot be ordered posts. I'm not trying to do technology. Okay, there's a bunch of argumentations in the mosque, experiences with other Muslims. So, what's fascinating is one of the most common responses to other than Muslims, other faith religions, people leaving their faiths, is actually experiences of other practitioners. Them being bad role models. Right? And over here it's really important. Like our teachers, I remember when we first started studying, they would constantly like knock like this point into our brains to the point where I honestly thought it was like a bit too much. But again, not to sound like an old man, but the older I get, the more I find a lot of value in this statement. And that is, our role models and our heroes should not be people, they're our peers. Right? Like, there's an old adage in Arabic, or classical scholars would tell us, make your role models people who are already dead. Now, I know that sounds like morbid, but if someone who's already passed away, like, you can make a definitive proclamation, like, they ended their life on a good note, or on a bad note. Now, how tragic would it be if Allah already decreed someone to ultimately not be guided, to not be a good person, and you took their life trajectory as a role model for you, and you made a judgment call on the entire religion because of it? Who loses out? You or Shaitan? Right? You lose out. Right? You have nothing, you have more to lose by doing that than anybody else. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that community doesn't put a bad taste in your mouth. And all of us, I'm sure, have experiences with what should have been like really wholesome moments in your life, but they were made terrible by like a nosy auntie asking you why you weren't married yet, an intrusive uncle asking you whether you got into college yet or not, or whatever, right? I realize that is an element of the religion that, by the way, all of us have to navigate. All of us have to navigate. No one is immune to this. You all heard my biography before. People ask me, why did you double major in college? Especially people double major in things that are related to each other, like bio and chem or something. You did bio and history. Why is that? I tell people all the time, history because I liked it, and bio because I'm brown. And it was written on my birth certificate, must be a bio major. Otherwise my dad would kick me out of the house. Right? So all of us have to navigate like community challenges. That does not preclude the truthfulness of the religion. Right? When you read about the kind of culture the Prophet ﷺ had in his community, it was a huge difference than how our community are. Huge difference. So there's a problem in Islam, or there's a problem in the way that we run our communities. Right? To give a brief example, there was a young man who comes to a Masjid al-Nabawi, to the Prophet's mosque, and openly and publicly asked the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, I cannot control my desires. I just cannot. So give me permission to commit zina. Could you imagine a young man and what their fate would be? Like if they come into the masjid today and ask this question. Do you know how many like slippers they could throw in their direction? You know what I mean? Like, it's unheard of. And yet the Prophet ﷺ not only entertained the question, he answered him in a very logical way. He said, young man, do you have a mother? Do you have sisters? He said, yeah. He said, would you like anyone to do that for them? Like to them? So in that moment, he didn't throw like an ayah of Quran in their face. He didn't throw a hadith in their direction. He just talked it out with them. And by the end of it, he got it. He was like, yeah, you're right. Right? So sometimes the problem is ostensibly the community. Because the community is more of a reflection of our state of affairs, like in the modern day, but less so of how Islam ought to be. The true representation of what a community ought to be is two things. Number one, the prophetic mosque in Medina, and of course the masjid that I'm the imam at, because we're a super dope community, because they have the best imam in the world, right? So because I live here, I serve in Austin, the masjid I'm the imam at is like 4 minutes away from here, by the way. It's in downtown. It's on the campus of UT, University of Texas. So 99% of my congregation are university students, right? And because I live here, I've been doing sessions here and also doing local stuff as well. So yesterday, I did 3 sessions in the morning. I left the hotel. I did a wedding. I came back. I did a session here. I went back. I did another wedding. And I came back for a session. Believe it or not, after this, I have to go to another wedding after this. I have 2 weddings today to go to. I went to 3 weddings yesterday and 2 today, right? So in the beginning of every wedding, I always congratulate the bride and groom. Because of their wedding? No, not because of their wedding. I congratulate them because they have the honor and the privilege of having their nikah done by the most handsome Iman in all of No, so, real talk, that's why in a community like ours, we try to make it as inclusive and welcoming and inviting as we can. And not because we're special, we model our behavior based on the prophetic mosque. So from day one, we did a deep dive in what are the things that the Prophet did in his mosque, and that's what we try to do. So no one can come into our masjid and say that because of how I was treated here, Islam is bad. That can never be the case. So that's more of a reflection of how communities are run. And unfortunately, they're run, I hate to say it, and sorry for the uncles who are listening to the recording, but the masajid, the mosques nowadays are run more like corporations or country clubs than actual masajid. And that's our fault, not Islam's fault. It's not Islam's fault. I'm sorry. This one should tell me the password. He's like, no way, bro. Like, my DMs are for me. So how did your parents address Islam at home? Did your understanding of relationship with Islam change after you left home? It's a very good question. They addressed Islam by teaching lectures. What was halal and haram? They prioritized above everything, showing me Islamic values. Moving away weakened my discipline. Yeah. Same here. Islam in my family is worth a rule book. That's very, very common. Parents were open, but never really shied away, probably, from difficult conversations. It's just like shied away. I mean, I don't know what they meant. No, I know. You know that scene in, you guys are super religious, so you don't watch TV. But there used to be a show, it's on Netflix now, Community. They all have to draw something, and then, and like Britta, one of the characters, collects it, and she's like, who drew this? And Troy's like, it's a butt. I mean, I don't know. So, anyway, oh my gosh. I apologize. I try to keep touching it, but I just. Speaking of wedding, this guy's freaking out. Are you coming? Should I? My wife ordered pizza. I just announced. I'm sorry, guys. All right. Yeah. Led through example. Very cool. Very good. Difficult since practicing Islam at times is equivalent to turning around. Wow. I can definitely relate to that. I grew up in New York, right after 9/11, so it felt the same way. What I'll say about this is the nature of your relationships, especially with your parents, will change the older that you get. And the tone of that relationship, I'm sorry to say, is going to be more on you than it is on them. For a number of reasons. Chiefly among them, there's different phases that, parenting goes through. So there's an introductory phase where you're a baby and they kind of play with you. That's a fun phase. Then there's more of an instructive phase where they're teaching you right from wrong, do this, don't do that, etc., right? And then there's a phase where you get a bit older and you don't appreciate them instructing that much anymore, but you kind of want them to be there as a friend, as a companion. The problem, though, is a few things. Number one, out of the three phases, the parents are most comfortable, especially immigrant parents, in which of the three phases? The middle one, the instructive phase. So you could be 35 years old, and they'll still tell you that hijab doesn't match. Go change. Go make your bed. Go eat your vegetables. And you're like, dude, I'm 40. Doesn't matter. It does not matter. Right? That's one problem. The other problem is there's a psychological phenomenon. They call it separation. Separation. is basically when you kind of grow up and, whatever a baby eats is what everyone else is eating. You kind of mince it and make it digestible for a baby, right? But you kind of feed it. For a Desi household, the baby gets introduced to super spicy really early in life, right? So, but eventually you get to a point where you have your own preferences in terms of food. You have your own friend circle that you rather hang out with. And not necessarily auntie so-and-so, uncle so-and-so, right? Now, separation in a healthy relationship should occur in adolescence. In Muslim families, especially for girls, if it occurs at all, it occurs way past adulthood. And for many girls, it occurs after marriage. So once you get married, now you're an adult. Before then, you're treated like a 12-year-old. And you could be 21 or 31, for God's sake. But in your eyes, how many of y'all, because you're girls, have a curfew? How many of y'all, your parents want to know who you're going to go out with, but they'll never ask your brother, right? Because especially girls are treated like they're 12 their whole life, right until they get married, right? And so, how you deal with your parents it's kind of stuck in their mind, stuck on one dial. But the way the relationship develops, it's more on you than it is on them. So regardless of how your upbringing was, because we had a mixed bag here of some pretty wholesome experiences, like parents being good role models, parents teaching you the right deen, and then also parents who, like this one, was more like a rule book. But I will say that in your adult life, one of the worst things you can do is blame your parents for your adult decisions. Don't do it. Don't do it. There is something to be said about processing how your childhood was like, and following the breadcrumbs of how you got to where you are. But then once you do that, and once you kind of process that with someone who's able to process that with you, then don't unnecessarily blame them for how you turned out. Because there does come a point in every Muslim's life, and by the way, Islamically speaking, you're an adult long before you're 18 years old. Long before you leave the house. Long before you start college. And so it's sort of unfair at this point in your life where you've Islamically been an adult longer than you've been a child to keep blaming your parents for how you turned out. It's actually kind of hurtful and not productive. It's not productive. And to make it worse, people lump Islam into that. Because my parents sucked, Islam is wrong. That's sort of illogical. It's kind of illogical. So, what are some turning points in your faith? Seeing someone passing away or performing Umrah, that's a powerful experience. The Prophet actually said that visit the graves frequently because they remind you of the hereafter and the reality of your life. Yeah, I didn't have to be the best Muslim in history, but I'm the best Muslim that I can be. When I was broke, you see, so being broke is interesting. People go in one of two different directions. The Prophet ﷺ said that al-faqru, that poverty can at times lead to a decrease in faith. Because that the overall negativity of what you can't do and what you can't afford and what other people have and what you don't have can lead you to be ungrateful. But as we see, as the crisis is unfolding, is getting worse by the day in Gaza, there are people in abject poverty, in an incredibly unimaginable situation, and yet their Iman is getting higher and higher. So really, poverty is, or as you put it, being broke, is. Y'all see that viral video of the African American kid? He was doing this math problem from his elementary school. He's like, Jarrell has 2 pennies, 3 quarters, and 5 dimes. How much money does you have? Jarrell broke. It's hilarious. Anyway, jobless during COVID, having time to reflect. Yeah, a lot of people reflected on faith during COVID. be honest. Shout out. All right, YouTube, right? MISJ. I'm done with acronyms, man. Every masjid also has an acronym. Everyone. ICGA, ICLT, NAMCC, ICHC, I said MCC, ICRR. I'm like, dude, who? It's like one day I'm going to start an institution called Institute. Right? It's like what's done with the names, not acronyms. We do it a bit much as Muslims, right? Anyway. Oh wow, yeah. Reflecting my physical and emotional health. Being in college, I'm saying, increased my need. Very good. Questions about Islam. Oh, reciting Quran in school. Very good. The Quran talks about this, right? Like, when ayah is recited properly and it like hits, you increase your faith. So how come some of these are like bold?
There's like a
Is it like a
title.
super comment? When I become, you guys pay extra for this? When I become more active in the masjid on your campus? Ooh, that's my masjid. We're near campus. No, I wasn't one of you guys. I'll take the credit anyway. It's like Imam Anwar's stellar example. Embarrassed of my religious identity. And they gain courage. Yeah. Wow. Near-death experience. It's one of those moments where I wish I wasn't anonymous. Like, I really want to hear the story about this. There's a famous scholar here in America. He's the founder of the first, Muslim college, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. His story is this. When he was 18 years old, he was in a car accident. He almost died. And that caused him to, study the faith, or several faiths, and he stumbled upon Islam, and he becomes Muslim. And now he's, the leading scholar in America. Right? So yeah, this is a real thing. Learn the Quran in English. Learn the Quran stuff. Very good. Very, very good. Yeah, this is the last one, right? So yeah, what are some topics that are difficult? Nafs, politics, mental health, sex addiction, or sex, addiction. Mental health. Punctuation matters, guys. What's the famous one? It's don't eat, grandma. Grandma. Yeah. Marriage. Okay. Mental health. Dang. A high bar. Struggle's real, boys. They can't afford it. Humanism is such a okay. Cool. Yeah, this.
Yeah, thank you, Imam Anwar, for sharing all that, all your wisdoms and thoughts in response to the different responses that we've gotten. We have time for Q&A, so if anyone has any questions or wants to write their questions down, there's a notepad in the back. But if you don't have any questions, I have a couple of my own that I could ask.
And I apologize. My sessions are more jokes than actual content. Hopefully you guys got a good experience out of it, if anything else. But yeah, in the couple of minutes that we have, I actually wanted to share just one hadith with y'all, which I think is relevant to just this overall theme. And that is that there's a famous companion, his name is Hanzala, and he was someone that was super active in the Muslim community. So when there was a lecture to be given, he was the first in the row. Whenever there was some initiative or charity to be given, he was the first in line to kind of participate. And for a few days, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, famous companion, he noticed that Hanzala wasn't really around. He wasn't coming as frequently as he used to. So this is, by the way, a master class in how to be a concerned community member. So he went and investigated. Where is he? And he went to his house, and he saw the creepiest thing. What do y'all call it in your language? Sus? Right, yeah. So he walked in, and it's all dark, and Hanzala's brooding in the corner, right? And imagine like you came into my office, and I'm like in the corner, like facing away from you, right? And to make it even worse, he starts talking in the third person. Look how creepy that is. Like you walk into a dark office, and I'm facing the wall, and you're like, Imam Anwar, are you okay? And I'm like, Imam Anwar doesn't feel well. I think I'll come back after the dinner done. You know, like, so he starts talking in third person. He goes, Nafaka Hamdala. Nafaka Hamdala. Nafaka Hamdala. Which means Hamdala has become a munafiq. And munafiq means hypocrite. And English hypocrites like, oh, you're just a hypocrite, you're using plastic straws, and you care about the environment. No, hypocrite in Islam is a big crime, right? So he obviously is like, what would make you say something so extreme? And he goes, well, when I'm around the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, my level of Iman is up here. My faith is unshaken. And he says, actually in the narration, that it's as though I can see paradise and hellfire in front of me. But then when I'm away from him, my Iman goes down. And Abu Bakr, being who he is, instead of comforting the guy and consoling him and offering some solace and some advice, he reflects on his own state. And he goes, you know what? I feel the same way. Maybe I'm a munafiq. And they both start crying. So then they both go to the Prophet, start crying. We both are munafiq, we both are munafiq. And the Prophet's like, well, hold on a second. So they tell them the story. And in that moment, he gives some really good advice. And it's the advice I want to share in this particular session, which is about doubts and overcoming them. We can't possibly talk about every single scenario and every case of doubt. However, there's a general rule of thumb. He said in this moment to the companions, and by extension giving us this advice, the Prophet tells us, sallallahu over 1,000 years ago, that al-Iman yazidu wa yanqus. That faith, by its very nature, goes up and down. That's a part of being Muslim. There are other companions who approached the Prophet and said, we have doubts in our heart that we dare not verbalize with our tongues. They said this. They actually said this. That we have doubts that are so severe, we're embarrassed to speak about them. Because of course they didn't have this technology to do like anonymous Q&A, like whatever doubt I have, plaster it to the world, right? If you have to like plaster a doubt to the world, you have to physically say it, right? So they had doubts like this, believe it or not. This fantasy that we live in, the Sahaba were like ironclad Iman, 24/7, right? This is, like they actually had doubts. And the Prophet allowed for them to go through that journey, to be a bit low, to be a bit high. He said Iman is like this. Faith is like this. So a few things I recommend. Number one, there's nothing that gets you back spiritually to Islam than a daily dose of Quran every single day. Every single day. Even if you're a sister who's on a monthly cycle, maybe you're not reciting the Quran per se, but even like going through its translation, having some relationship with the word of Allah, there's nothing that can replace that. Number one. Number two, people often talk about Quran and Hadith. Hadith is a very specific like study within the faith. More so than Hadith, what's much more powerful is going through a seerah, a prophetic biography, cover to cover. Cover to cover. If you're not a reader, some of the most detailed biographies of the Prophet are done in English. So number one, Sheikh Yasser Qadi from Dallas has a YouTube series free of charge. It's the most academically detailed treatment of the Prophet in the English language. And number two, one of my teachers, Sheikh Abdul Nasir Janda, he has a 201 episode audio podcast on the Prophet's life. The reason I mention both of them is Sheikh Yasser's one is very academic. So for example, he'll talk about the Prophet being an orphan, and in the lecture, he'll talk about all the different opinions about when he became an orphan, and what is an orphan, and what's the definition of an orphan. So when you go through that series, there's not a single rock of the seerah that you haven't unturned. You know the whole thing, inside and out. But when Sheikh Abdul Nasir does the same lecture, he'll do the same thing, but then at the end of it go, are there not orphans in the world today? How cheap is it just to sponsor one orphan? It's like 10 cents for a meal. $100 you feed them for a year. How easy is it to sponsor an orphan, but we're not doing it? And And yet the Prophet said, sallallahu that Ana wa kafir al-yatim kahatayn, that me and the person who takes care of an orphan will be like this in the day of judgment. So he'll connect it to everyday life. Right? There's nothing that brings you back to Islam than going through a good, robust biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because you see the ups and downs of the Sahaba in real time. The pain of Uhud, but the victory of Badr. The pain of Hudaybiyah, but the victory of Fatih Makkah. You see all of it. And you compare it to your life. Right? Wallahu a'lam.
Thanks again, Iman. So a lot of the discussion in this session has been revolved around yourself and doubt, and I wanted to open up the conversation to what happens if one of your friends or a relative experiencing doubt. So I'll share a personal story. One of my friends and loved ones, someone who I broke fast with, celebrated Eid with, and prayed Fajr with, he left the religion, and it honestly left me with a lot of shame and guilt, and I didn't really know what to do. And my question to you is, what advice would you give someone like me? Like, this individual was blood relative, and now is no longer the religion.
Yeah, subhanAllah, while I personally don't have experiences like this powerfully, I referenced my wife earlier. She's a huge advocate and supporter of the work I do, and I couldn't do a fraction of what I do today without her help and support. Her best friend growing up, and also her cousin. So again, like you said, blood, someone she broke fast with, someone she spent like family vacations with and Eid with. They were inseparable, like growing up. Her cousin also left the fold of the faith growing up, and it was devastating to her. And it was around the same time that my wife started wearing hijab full time. So while she's growing closer to the deen, her best friend in life and cousin is leaving it all together, right? And one of the most difficult things that literally every single prophet had to go through, and many of you may have heard this before in some of my other sessions, I'm a huge advocate of stories of the prophets, because these are timeless stories that have been captured in the Quran forever. And what's interesting is, you can hardly find a story of any prophet or any messenger mentioned in the Quran except that one of his family members is also mentioned. The wife of Nuh alayhi salam, the wife of Lut alayhi salam, the son of Nuh alayhi salam, the father of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the son of Nuh alayhi salam, the children of Yaqub alayhi salam, the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, the mother of Musa alayhi salam, the sister of Musa alayhi salam, the brother of Musa alayhi salam, the mother of Isa alayhi salam. Can I keep going? Right, the wife of Ayub alayhi salam, right? Sulaiman alayhi salam and his children, Dawood and Sulaiman. Right? I was confused between Dawood and Sulaiman. Who's the father and who's the child? Want to know my mnemonic device? D for dad and S for son. You're welcome. You'll thank me later. Right? D stands for David, Dawood, and Sulaiman was his son. S, you get it? Cool, you're welcome. Alright, anyway, so there's not a single prophet that's mentioned in the Quran except that their family members are also mentioned. And 9 times out of 10, those family members will be what? Non-Muslim. Non-Muslim. And every single prophet had to deal with this lesson, including especially the final prophet, Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when his uncle Abu Talib passed away. Not just the fact that he died, but how he died. How he died. Where he was this close to saying the Shahada, the Prophet whispering in his ear and saying, if you just whisper it to me, I will come to your defense on the day of judgment. But that whispering being drowned out by yelling of the Quraysh, how dare you turn your back on your forefathers? How dare you leave your religion? And him ultimately not taking the Shahada. And in that moment, being taught, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. O Messenger of Allah, you don't guide whom you love. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ, rather Allah, يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah guides whomever He wills. So I think the 2 pieces of advice I'd offer is, number 1, to kind of take stock of like your relationship with this person. If it's close enough that y'all can have not just one but repeated heart-to-hearts, talk about how his leaving of Islam affects and makes you sad. Because people are not looking for a debate. No one goes into a debate wanting to be proved wrong. And my own wife had a number of conversations about the fallacy of like the other whack religion that she ended up embracing, but nothing worked. If I mention the religion, y'all are gonna laugh. Because it's one of those religions that even other religions like agree it's wrong. It's like no one converts to that religion. But she did. There was no amount of intellectual reasoning that could convey her. Why? Because one day she walked in to a church of that religion and they welcomed her in a way that Muslims didn't. And that stuck with her for life. So the reason she converted wasn't intellectual. It wasn't because she had fundamental problems with the basic tenets of the religion. And even those that do, by the way, most of the time, it's emotional problems masked in the veneer of pseudo-intellectualism. You really have to get to the core of what is really bothering them. Something about Islam did not feel like home for them. And when people aren't home, they get agitated. It's uncomfortable. They don't feel welcome. Alright? Number two, second piece of advice I'd offer is, as cliche as it sounds, but in moments like this, you have to double down on prophetic behavior, prophetic attributes and character. Don't you also be an added reason why they become further away from the faith. And finally, number three, the third thing is the most difficult thing to convey. And it took many years for my wife to learn this. And it took many, many years for people even better than her and people who are going through this to learn this. And that is that what I alluded to earlier, and that is guidance is ultimately not in your hands. And if you approach this situation with the attitude that I am the sole reason for this person leaving and potentially coming back into the faith, you're going to go crazy. And it's going to start to affect your Iman and your faith. So for anyone out there who is struggling with family members and loved ones who are drifting away, something very powerful is reflecting on the Prophet's own experience, the prophets of the past as well, and making dua for them. One of the most powerful experiences in your own personal spirituality is making dua for someone in their absence. Because the Prophet tells us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when you make dua for someone in their absence, an angel comes and is appointed to you who has two tasks. Number one, they say Amin to the duas that you're making. And number two, they ask Allah for the same thing for you. Right? And I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and said, when I started making dua for so-and-so person, it softened my heart towards them. And it even opened up my heart to better ways to connect with them. There's a spiritual connection that occurs between you and a person when you make dua for them in private.
Thanks again. Do we have any questions from the audience? Let's try to get a couple. Okay, if not, thanks again, Imam Anwar, for a very insightful speech. Insightful and funny too.
Next time we'll come. I have a book of dad jokes. I'll bring that next time. If y'all can make dua for my son, he just turned 1 a month ago, and he started walking yesterday. So I'm here missing that because of you guys. I love you guys a lot. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. I'm late. Unfortunately for the world, I did not. Yeah.